Welcome to another episode of the Fintech Garden podcast. Today my guest is Artem Boboshko, Vice President of Business Development at DashDevs. Artem has extensive experience guiding major corporations in the British financial markets through digital transformation and cloud migration strategies. In our conversation, Artem shares practical advice on how to choose the right engagement model, product outsourcing, software outsourcing, or outstaffing, and why it matters. The importance of clearly defining expectations and accountability when collaborating with vendors. How fintech companies can strategically use external partnerships to boost innovation, accelerate time to market, and manage costs effectively. Get ready for an insightful conversation filled with actionable takeaways and forward-thinking strategies. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and I would like to welcome to our episode of Fintech Garden. It's a new start for us because today we are actually recording in the studio, and I have really good guest today. It's Artem Boboshko. He's a VP of Business Development at DashDevs, and he's really experienced guy. And today's our topic is overcoming challenges and working with the vendors in financial industry while innovating. And he has a lot of experience how to make sure that the companies who are thriving to innovate and they building new things in the market, they will be more effective. And hello, Artem, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Igor. It's really great to discuss this topic today. I think this is the basics that has to be discussed out loud, actually, because different companies, they do worry about different engagement models, different business models, different different vendors they have to work with, and so on. So it would be great to debunk it today.
Okay, so today let's start with the definitions, because by having proper definitions, then we can go deeper in details and overview the things. So on the market, there are several types, and there are a lot of engagement nowadays because it's ecosystem, and in this ecosystem, we are, as a fintechs and financial industry companies, we're using different vendors as a service or as a product. So if we talk about the service, like what is your vision, how the companies, or what are the definitions of the business models, how the company can engage with another one in service mode?
Right. I guess the easiest way would be to describe the business models on the example of our company, because I think we actually cover all of them, and that could apply to pretty much all of the players in the market over there. So let's go from in the priority order. For some, that order could be a bit different, but I guess all in all, it's pretty much logically the same. So I would say the number one business model is the software outsourcing. Then the second one would be product outsourcing. Then the third, but also perhaps the most popular, is outstaffing or staff augmentation. They call it different ways.
Or dedicated teams.
Or dedicated teams as well, correct. Then number four would be probably consulting. Then the next one after that would be recruitment. Different variations of it as well. And sometimes there is a mixture of outstaff and buyout models. And then there's also a licensing model. Right. So I think how many all in all were there? Like 7 or 8?
It was more like than 6. Licensing, in my understanding, it tends to be more product-like, because in this case, like you're granting, but it's a good one because we can narrow it down and discuss a little bit later. Maybe just to guide the discussion. If we're talking about the engagement with software engineer companies, and why we're discussing this, because fairly nowadays, all the financial products, they exist in digital form. Like you rarely find the products which are contacting and working with the clients in physical space. There are still some branches, there are still some ways where you interact with the customer in physical world, but most of the interactions are happening right now digitally, which makes a lot of demand for creating the software and having the service for creating the software. And one part which we are deliberately like not going to cover as a first part is the partners who are we buying the service as a ready-made components or as software as a service or even like some BaaS solutions for our companies. We going to focus on the discussion for the engineering services and different business models. Okay, thank you for different kind of engagements. And you started with the software outsourcing. And I think our listeners will be beneficial, or they would like to know what is the difference between software outsourcing and product outsourcing, because the second term is not really popular on the market. What exactly it means and what is the difference?
Right. That's a very solid question. And I believe at some point of time in the past we've discussed with you and the difference in between those two. Actually, on an example of a very basic thing. It was something that around apple pie,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So basically, I guess it would be also a good thing to explain it in the similar wording for our audience, right? Because I guess different people might be watching us, and some would understand things in different ways. So imagine a client comes to you and says, "I need an apple pie," right? And do whatever you want, but I need an apple pie. So in short, this is the product outsource or product outsourcing. And then software engineering outsourcing is something when they come and say, well, we have this and these elements or these ingredients from the apple pie. Well, we have some dough, we have some water, we have apples, and we have something. But we don't know how to reach the stage where we have the ready-made apple pie, and we don't know what temperature we have to use, what kind of environment we have to bake it in, how many people should work on that, what kind of people should work on it, and so on. And this is the software outsourcing, because more often than not, the client would have some input in different variations. It could be even just the business requirements, right? But you would have the know-how, and you would have the resources to implement it.
Yeah.
So I guess this is the basic difference.
Okay, yeah, it's a good example. Like, hey, I have a recipe from my grandma, and I have certain elements, commodity. I have certain BAs who already worked on the recipes, and we find out that the fine tuned is I don't know, 5 apples for this amount of the pie. Yeah, it's a really good example. And why do you think there is a difference? Like, why companies they come in with the generic request, like I need an apple pie, instead of coming with the recipe? Is it so hard, or what is like the cases when I'm coming and asking like, make me some apple pie, or I have a deliberate instructions or a deliberate input for you to start?
I would say the very common thing, the very common reason actually why the clients would do that is that they don't really know how to do it at the very basic level. They don't know how many resources they would potentially need, so they don't know how to calculate it, to estimate it. Probably they are operating with the limited resources in terms of budget, in terms of some kind of vision, in terms of network, and those kind of things. And this is why they come to you, well, to us or to any other vendor, and they say, can you help us do this? Can you help us estimate it? Or maybe they are at some point where they've started doing something and they stumbled upon some challenge, right? In terms of investment or license or regulation, and they don't know what comes next. And they need this piece of advice, as well as then, most probably actually help with implementing it.
Yeah. So in this case, from my experience, I would put it this way. So we have companies who have an ability to innovate in financial space, but it doesn't mean that you have previous experience and exact understanding, like what exactly to do to have the product available to the market. And sometimes it's a challenge because it's a digital one. Like the ways how you implement a certain thing is like a million different ways. And sometimes it's really hard to have an opinion, like what exactly an apple pie I want. Is it like 500 grams or I don't know, for the whole family, do we serve in one piece and then, I don't know, a coffee comes as a beneficial product? Like it's really hard to say. And sometimes companies need a help to make their mind. Like, what do you see from your experience is actually trendy on this street? Like, I have a high street, I have a lot of people coming in, but what is this profile of those people? Like, do they really into apple pies? And that's something that I think the part of the product outsourcing, because you are helping to navigate the environment, the current state of the market, current business models, and current trend, even might say, like everyone is into crypto right now. They add in as a beneficial story to their products, even if the products are initially from the fiat story or working with the different markets. So in this case, product is kind of shaping what you want, and software outsourcing is like helping to execute what we know, what we want. That's a really good one. And I think, in my experience, the next question is usually accountability, because in one level, the companies, they want to innovate and take an accountability. Is it really the hot topic with the vendor communication and engagement with the vendors in fintechs about accountability? So what do you think about that?
That's a good one. Right. I guess it depends on the company profile, on the stakeholder profile, on the background of the stakeholder who's reaching out to you. In many cases, those people, well, let's take a profile of a founder and a early stage startup. Probably a person that's helping to start that company, or that's actually doing the solo founding, so to say, is a person that has a rich background, perhaps in financial services, they're from banking or any other type of fintech, and they bring that expertise with them. Those people, I would say, those kind of people would want to have a major part in this project. So they would at least want to oversee it, control it in many ways, perhaps manage it, and so on. But if they're coming to a vendor, that means that some part of accountability they want to put on the vendor, right? And it's only logical, because in the end, they are coming to the vendor for some expertise as well. Perhaps the vendor has been on the market for quite a while, and they've worked with similar founders, similar startups, and they've gained that expertise in that particular market where the founder wants to start the company. So this is why they come for that knowledge. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. Like somewhere, well, decades ago, I read really interesting story. Like if you're building the company, the really first person that you need to hire is a copy of yourself, like copy of your expertise. And the idea behind that is pretty simple, because if you have an expertise something, and usually, like from what I can see, the startups or new ventures, they start in technology space. Like, a lot of people are focusing into the fintechs from technology standpoint. Like everything is digital, APIs, I don't know, take a look. And in this case, the really first person that you're engaging with and hiring, usually the same knowledge and experience that you have. Because in this case, for you, it's easier to control and understand what is happening. Like, I don't know, I'm a technical person. And if I hire someone from marketing, I will have to learn the marketing to make my own opinion, to control the process, to understand all the small details which is affecting like the process and outcomes of those processes. And that's kind of overlaps with the vendors, because I think sometimes companies are saying, okay, we're good with the technology and we will not bring the vendor because we're good with the technology. But that's kind of vice versa, because in this case, if you know something, then it's easier to shift the accountability because you have the same language. You know what you want, you can put it in proper terms, you can properly explain to the vendor, and vendor is capable to receive this I don't know, RFP, vision of the product, take accountability for the product with the previous experience and execute it and deliver with the time and the budget. So it kind of overlaps with accountability. If you've been there, done that, it's easier for you to shift the accountability and for the company to take. Okay.
Yeah, and you mentioned keeping the expertise or the situation when the founders or people, well, let's say product owners, right? We call them product owners because they can be anyone who would know, who would see the vision, right? Who would have the vision of their future product. So in many cases, they want to develop the product or develop some kind of piece of software internally. And they want to do that solely because they think that preserving this internally would help them in some ways. But more often than not, actually, it has a lot of drawbacks as well. Some of them are, if you keep lots of your stuff internally, there is a lot of overhead that comes with time. And also, more often than not, the projects that you're involved in are kind of time bound and they are short. They are not always, the duration of the projects are not always the same as the lifetime of the company, right? Because there could be multiple projects throughout your company company duration. And this is where the vendors come in very handy, where they can scale up and down their resources. They can provide them in a matter of weeks, days, weeks. Sometimes, it's very short time of period of time. And those advantages of the vendors in the market are usually ignored by the founders who want to do that, who want to do everything internally. Some other things are that founders are not taking into account are, for example, a budget that they need to allocate to some product. So they cannot effectively say how much they would really need. And people who've been doing that for quite a while can come to them and they say, this is how much this is going to cost. And, if this is a trusted vendor that you've selected by going through some process, as you mentioned, RFPs or RFIs and so on, multiple stages, or they've been recommended to you, this happens a lot, right? I would say taking their word for is worth. I mean, taking into account their word is worth doing, because as I said, they've been doing that for quite a while. What I'm wondering is, how do you consider, taking some development of some product internally versus delegating it to the vendors on the market? Are there any positive or negative, consequences from doing that?
It's a really tough question, and maybe I would slice it into two areas and would prefer to discuss two different cases. Like with apple pies, I really love this example, complicated and complex. Because if you are making the apple pie, even if you don't know like which exactly you want, like is it half a kilo or is it for family, is it grandpa recipe, it's still apple pie. Like on the market, there is a really good understanding what is the apple pie. Because if you have plums there, it's definitely not an apple pie. So I would say there are two problems which can be splitted by complexity and complications. So the first is if something is complicated, we know at high level what are the steps we need to do to get the result. And complex is that we don't know what exactly to do, but we know how to estimate that we have the result. So it's a little bit like quite close in terms of the definitions, but the nature of those two things is different. Because if certain thing is complicated, like if you have the recipe, you have eggs, you have flour, you can make the apple pie. And even if you don't have an experience in that, it's complicated because it might require certain skills or time from your side. But in the end, you have steps to follow and you know what is the result. Usually in financial industry and with the digital products, companies are struggling with the complex problems. Like we need to build a new innovative product, and then we kind of fill in what exactly to do. And what I think the companies can be beneficial from vendors in those two value threads. There are companies out there who have an experience in financial industry, and they can help you to understand what do you need to be competitive on the market. Like they can suggest, they can do a market review, they can take a look in their previous cases and what worked exactly on this market with the previous clients. And it can be like the problem solving for the complexity. Like we don't know what to do. And then maybe help, maybe not to execute it. And definitely there is a second part, which I think a lot of is missing out because we kind of combining those two things, what to do and how to execute. The second part, when we know what to do, like there are a lot of functionality which is kind of commoditized. I don't know, I need the KYC process. I need to select the vendor. Okay, it's a complicated, still we have the input as a budget. We have the understanding, okay, we don't want to spend more, I don't know, the $1 per check for the person. So we have certain input that we can give to the vendor. We can do the discovery phase, select the vendor for the KYC, and then we can execute and make the new onboarding process with the vendor. And sometimes companies are into the life cycle. Okay, we would like to keep the knowledge internally. We would like to educate it ourselves. Then you kind of become in the situation when you don't have a new blood, fresh ideas, that you kind of live in the same hedgehog or same day groundhog day all the years, and you're kind of losing the competition. So in those two areas, I think there are types of the vendors that can be used and companies will benefit. And my question, I think since we are discussing a lot when it works, at what stages or what are the things that you can say it's not recommended to use the vendor?
Oh, what a question. All right. Well, let me position it the way I think about it, and perhaps you would have another opinion on that. Some of the obvious situations are actually when the roles within the company that are necessarily needed for this or that project can stay permanently. So you don't really need to go out there and to look for for a software engineer of a certain programming language, if this is something that you're going to be doing on a repetitive basis. And if it's not a short-time project, right? I think that I've mentioned it before quite shortly, but again, this is very obvious. So for example, some roles like a business analyst and quality assurance and designers, perhaps. And sorry for mentioning that guys. Perhaps, and this is kind of logical, right? Those roles are not needed for a, 2-3 year period of time, because usually they would come in, they would provide their input throughout some time. Can be up to a year, yes, but perhaps could be even the on and off engagement. And this is the situations when the vendors, could kind of cut some of their costs, when they approach this a bit logically. So this is one of the situations. Would you have any other in mind?
I'm still thinking, and one of the area what I think is not beneficial to engage with the vendors when you don't have a proper understanding like how to estimate the results. Because I've seen a lot of situations when we need something, we are not sure if we have a budget or we have a good understanding how to estimate the outcome. It's like I wouldn't say trying to innovate, but trying to do something and not coming up with the proper conversion into the goals and the plans. Because engagement, and maybe just a different type of the engagement, instead of finding someone for the software outsource on the product outsource, maybe kind of do the discovery phases, make up your mind. So I would say, depending on the business model, the engagement will not be fruitful if you're trying to engage in one model, but expecting the results from another one.
That does happen.
And like a simple example, maybe with the software outsourcing, like we need a team, we need a procedure from the team, like project manager, BA, developers to develop a software, but we don't know what exactly this software should be doing. We don't know how we will estimate that the product is working fine. We don't know who are our customers. We don't know metrics that we want to achieve from the business perspective or even from the process perspective, like how we will onboard customers. So I would say it's not beneficial because you kind of expecting the team to do the product discovery and doing the product or business understanding, but kind of engaging in software engineering mode. So it's not beneficial. And going down a little bit, we mentioned the dedicated teams or Outstaff. It's kind of the same. Sometimes I've seen the small companies or even bigger one hiring as Outstaff. Like, I want to extend my existing business process with more people, with a more efficient business model, like or a more cultural fit, because I might have limited resources on the market to hire and extend existing team. And those companies sometimes saying, okay, I want Outstaff, which is commodity. Like, I just need iOS developer, but then expecting from those people to do the functionality which are not embedded into their position profile. Like asking an iOS developer, what do you think is the best way to onboard the customer? Yeah, they can suggest something, but is it their nature to come up with the product requirements? Do they have a proper time, proper resources, capability, capacity to go to the market, to explore third parties and say, okay, cool, I know that actually in this bank application, they innovated and I don't know, they're using bank ID instead of KYC process. So mixing up the expectations and the business model is not usually giving a good outcome. But maybe that's a part of the vendor to say, hi, I can see that you're trying to do something else. So let's talk about how we can be efficient in that.
This is the part where the vendors have to be a guide. They have to educate in a good way, right? Doesn't mean that the client is doing something wrong. Just that they assume some things, and the vendor could really step in and say, well, perhaps you're mixing up some things and you're mixing up the models. Sometimes it can be valid, yes, but if they and it can be valid in a situation when the client already has some internal resources as a base. Perhaps this is a founding team, or this is a team they want to consider as a core, as a foundational, the ones that maintain the underlying technologies and underlying infrastructure, existing infrastructure. And this is when they reach out to the vendor, and vendor comes in and says, you know what? Well, the way we have to move forward is twofold, and depends on how you can incorporate your internal resources. The first one is we can augment our resources with your resources, or the other way around, actually. Or if you see some particular parts that could be outsourced to us, we can be engaged specifically in those, and then we would develop them, deliver them. We would come in, we would do the knowledge transfer, because this is actually a very important part. We would sit with your resources, with your staff, with your employees. We would explain what's happening here, where you can locate it, where you can find it, and how to use it. And this is really, well, it sounds easy, but if done right, it is probably easy. But this is exactly what you said. This is the educational part. This is where the vendor has to share their experience that they gained throughout the years or more. Yeah.
It's a good point. Okay, and in this case, I can think about another example which might not be beneficial. Taking accountability for own internal decisions or the product selection. I've seen the cases when the companies they engage in with the third parties. They I don't know, having the dedicated team or outsource, but certain inputs are taken from the parent company, financial company. Like, okay, we acquired some piece of the software, and let's say banking core system, and sometimes the inputs might have the limitations which might not be able overcome by the team. Like, we have the core banking system, and it has bugs, or it has the flows which are not enabling our business models. And then sometimes I've seen the situation when the companies are putting the accountability on the team to not overcome those issues, but do they really have the possibility to do that? So I would say that another level which is required, like to be open, discussing the possibilities, because yes, that's a part of the responsibility of the team to highlight, okay, we don't know, we have a system and this system is designed A, B, C way. And what we're trying to achieve is different from this. And then it's not possible to achieve with this specific approach, and it's not possible to deliver the final product, which means you need to listen. But sometimes companies, they're so sure that something that has been previously acquired, previously has been used, is actually 100% achievable with this setup for the business model. And I've seen companies failing in that. And maybe it's sometimes even the communication level, because the middle management might see it, but then not having proper communication on the higher levels to say, okay, we made some not a good decision. We need to overcome and mitigate the risk, because then on the stake is our business model or a specific way how we're going to reach our customers and interact with them. And sometimes it's not happening. So are you really internally as a company ready to hear and collaborate and be in partnership, rather than saying, okay, I know that it works, and then do and execute it no matter what?
Yeah, that's a good point. Usually people see point A and point, I don't know, let's say B, or point or whatever, but they don't see a lot of things in between. So they want to reach that end result, but they ignore the risks. They ignore all of the possible assumptions that should be taken into account. Um, you know, and they think that it can be also delivered or reached with a particular budget, but that budget can be also changing dynamically depending on what they encounter on the way. If a company operates in the UK, let's say, and they want to start, their business in the Middle East, now it wouldn't be doing the same thing in the Middle East. It would be also regulated, but by different things, different institutions. Um, the cultural match would be different. The services needed would be different, and many other things. You cannot just copy paste it, right? It's not it's not a cookie cutter, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this is one of the examples. So aspirations is one thing, but the way to reach those end results can be very I guess complex in this way. But for the vendors, it can actually be not the complex, but not complex, but complicated, because they've been there, they've done that, and this is where the trust has to come into play
Yeah.
again.
And actually, I have a comment about this simple. From my management experience and execution experience, I think sometimes when we tend to think that something is simple, we don't know the amount of the efforts and what exactly has been done to make the things simple. And even like the process with Outstaff, it seems to be really simple. Like, okay, what do I have? I have a commodity. I would like to extend my existing business process or technical process. Like I have ideation process, I have product managers, I have BAs, designers, and then I would like to add and extend my technical team. And it sounds simple. Like I need iOS developers, I need some backend developers with the .NET, but to make sure that those people will be efficient in the setup, you need to have the cultural match, you need to have the technical background checks, you need to have a proper experience with even let's say in financial industry, T-shaped experts, because right now more and more companies are expecting that engineering team has an understanding of the business process. Like what exactly KYC means. Do we just upload into the documents? Do we really need to follow certain regulations in the region? Do we follow in some AML checks? What are the edge cases? How will it work? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's really important in this case to understand that even simple models sometimes has a lot of in the hidden side, what should be done to make it work perfectly. And sometimes the experience like, okay, it didn't work. Maybe those things were not properly executed and done by the vendor. So that's another side of the simplicity. Like we tend to think that it's simple, but what really happens on the background?
That's true. Fair enough. In other cases, actually, when a client, perhaps it could be in a different level, when we talk about, I don't know, banks or like big insurers. Um, what happens is that they want to come up with deliver a very huge, I don't know, new product or new platform, and they don't really have enough expertise, or they don't have enough resources internally. And even when they reach out to one particular vendor, it's not enough, and they start going and reaching out to different ones. And what happens is that to fully um, accommodate, like, or to come up with the full expertise, they would need to incorporate 2 or 3 vendors. And this is an exercise of a different level. This is when both the vendor, or the vendors that are going to be playing, together, and, well, working together, and the client, they have to know how to work in this kind of sequence. Right, this is something different. This is not really just coming and saying, can you deliver me something to me? This is coming and saying, okay, so this is going to be your remit, this is going to be your remit, and this is going to be yours, and now you have to come up with a approach of how to work together. um you know um Usually this is also time bound, and because the vendor calculated when they want to go on the market for this new solution, and they say, well, you've got 6 months, and I want to see the tangible results in this time period. Um so this is also something that the vendors should learn to do. They should know how to work and work fair with other vendors.
Yep.
So it's not always, taking and grabbing everything there is in the market to yourself. It's also knowing how to share um, complicated tasks and complicated projects with other vendors.
Okay. Thank you for that. Um, do you have any examples of this successful collaboration with vendors?
Short answer is yes.
Yeah, okay. Can we, like, high level, no breaking NDAs or M&A, like whatever, but can you tell the exact case, or a little bit more to details, like what was the case when the company used the vendor and it was successful case for using and overcoming certain internal challenges?
Yeah. Actually, this is something that overlaps with my previous idea. Um, This is when the client needed to deliver a sub product of their existing solution. It was a financial industry company um, in the UK market. I think I cannot say more. Um, but so what they wanted to do, they wanted to issue or like develop a new product for a certain category of people of a certain age, let's say. And for that, they had to incorporate and start working with a few vendors. Actually, there were 4 of them, and all 4 of them were responsible for uh, different input into
Yep.
that project. It was a huge project. It lasted for a year and a half or something like that. Um, and it had to do with different cloud providers, different data providers, different designs, and all of that. And of course, why the client wanted to outsource that is because they were lacking internal, both the know-how and the resources. Well, perhaps in the long run, I don't know how long would it take for them to come up with that and then hire and then design and predict and project everything. But a shorter way was to even engage in the RFP.
Yep.
And even with this process, it would be a more efficient way, and it was a more efficient way for the client.
So budget saving, better time to market, and better outcome because those people and potentially this engagement had a background where the previous experience was utilized, which is affecting the quality. Yeah, that's a
True.
good one, and overlaps maybe even with my potential, like my previous experience with the engaging with the dozens challenge bring.
Right.
It's out of the market right now, but what we've done completely from the scratch, we architected and we executed the core banking system, can say like that, and integrated with the various vendors like Clearbank, Modular Finance, Thread, Stripe, ThirdFin for the wealth management. And I would say if Project Imagine, the owner company, would choose to hire and build internal process, you don't have this experience for running software engineering. You don't have an experience running digital product. And sometimes it's faster. Yeah, it might cost a little bit more, but it really depends. Like if you mishire, if you misplan, if you misbudget, that it actually costs less because certain people as a company take an accountability in delivering on time, delivering with the good results, and that kind of becomes beneficial for the company.
That's lots of flexibility, right? You cannot really um, easily easily fire your employee, your colleague that worked at your company, but you can actually come to your vendor and say, this is not working out quite as well as we expected, and this is okay because the vendor has enough resources to come and say, well, it's all right, we can mitigate this risk for you. Here we go. Here is a bit more skilled employee or expert who we've already also vetted and so on. And this is okay. This happens sometimes, and this is why vendors exist, because they help mitigate those kind of risks.
Yeah. To sum up, maybe using previous experience and working before with a similar ill-defined problem, the vendor might be potentially more efficient and more effective for closing your need.
True.
Okay, so maybe the last stage of our podcast is to talk about the books. And today we will not skip it. And what is your book that you would like to highlight to our listeners?
Yeah, I've actually brought it to the studio. It's somewhere there on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's called Understanding Payments. Right. Actually, so this is a book that could be read and understood by both, let's say, newbies in the financial industries, in the financial industry, but also this is a book that can serve as a good reminder for people that have been in the industry for quite a while. So basically, it's got lots of content that spans from basic payment systems to regulations to security, fiat, and alternative payments, right? This is something that you can open up on a certain page and say, okay, I didn't think about it when I was talking to a client before, or okay, that's a good reminder. So I would say, this is one of the books that you can have as an alternative to even Googling something, because you can just open up on a particular section and say, nice, that's a good reminder.
Yeah, it's like your desktop book.
It's a go-to book, yeah.
Kind of glancing, I don't know, while waiting someone joining to the meeting. Okay, thank you for sharing this one. And today my book will be Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Shamim. Actually, that's a book that Anna Kovalenko suggested me almost 2 years ago. And it's really a good one. It actually was nominated as a bestseller by New York Times. And the idea of this book is how to be more effective, I would say, by acknowledging and working with your emotions and with the people. And maybe the really first overlap with the Shirzad was the Saboteur website. So there is a public page where you can do the test, and it highlights your internal mechanism, like what are those small judges that lives in you, and sometimes those judges and saboteurs, they help in your life, like the mechanism that help you in the early years or as a child to survive and be effective in an adult society, but then they kind of limit in you, like how you are reacting, overreacting certain things. And this book teaches you how to acknowledge your feelings, acknowledge your internal judgments about yourself, about other people, and align them to be more effective with the communication and getting the results done.
It sounds definitely like a very useful book. So would you say this is about identifying saboteurs, right?
Yeah. All right. Identifying and working with them. Like how do you can live together to make sure that they're not sabotaging your expected results and outcomes, because it's quite easy to fall into, I don't know, I'm a hyper rational person, and that's my saboteur. In one way, it helps me to rationalize a lot of things, but it's easy to be driven away by acknowledging that people have feeling. Like, I don't like it. I cannot explain it why. And it took me a while to understand that, okay, I can rationalize my feelings, but not everyone can. And sometimes, like, it's better to ask, okay, you don't want it because you don't like it. Yeah, that's a good reason, which wasn't good enough for me years ago.
Okay. Has it helped you change yourself a bit?
I hope so. That's a good question to people who are working with me for a while. But I think that's one of the way how to become more, I don't know, in calm and more relaxed way with yourself in first place. I hope, and I think if you are kind of becoming more self-calm and less disturbing person, then it actually affects all other people too.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy our new format with the studio. We will be experimenting and mixing up the online discussions with the offline in the studio, but please enjoy this one and have a great day.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you later.
Yeah, sure.